Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Empowered Teams podcast. I'm Eric, and I'm here with Toby.
You just took the words right out of my mouth. If I'm here with Toby, and right, and I'm here with
hi though.
And I'm here with Phil.
Hello.
One day we'll get this right.
It becomes a joke after a while, doesn't it?
I think it's quite good trying to work out how to do it. Speaking of our title today, Phil, would you like to commence the lesson?
Yeah, I mean, I like the play that we put in data literacy, and obviously spelling it wrong is kind of sums up really the conversation that I think we're going to have today. There's a lot of talk around this terminology of data literacy, and a lot of people in the industry trying to define what it actually covers. Well, I think it's a bit of a misnomer. I don't think it really does it justice, because it kind of, the two main things for me are about being curious with data. And that's the number one. It's that you understand that data is within your DNA of an organization, or DNA within everything that you do as an organization. So literacy is a component part of that, because it's a bit like being literate in the English language. So you can with the English, you can read, but it doesn't mean the same as you have knowledge. Yeah. And so the same, you can look at data within an organization, but can you derive meaning and information from that data? That's the key bit. That's the skills that you really need to learn, which is around being curious about it, about how you want to use it, being fluent in the use of data, how you visualize it, how you analyze it, how you can interpret it, and how you can drive meaning from that data. And they're the key skills. The other bit that I get frustrated with is that it feels like it's something that's standalone to an organization. You have all of these technical skills and you need to be data literate. Yeah. So whatever your skill is within an organization, if you're in HR or you're in payroll or you're in marketing, you have those specific skills to that job role that you have. As an adjunct to that, we now start talking about data literacy. I would argue that that's a fundamental currency in any role now. So I think now really it's one of the baselines. We should be getting to a position where that is taken for granted, a bit like in the UK and in France. I think like the baccalaureate, you've got a certain level of educational understanding, covers your maths, your English, etc. The same you should expect around competency around data, I think, because really that is the future of the direction, as we talked about in the last podcast, that businesses are going in. If you want to harness technology and use it in a way that's meaningful and purposeful and adds value to what you're doing, you've got to be comfortable around the use of that data, the use of that technology, and how it fits within your business. I had a really interesting conversation yesterday with a colleague. We were talking about ChatGPT, and that ChatGPT is only as good as the prompts you put into it. So again, you've got this whole. I could give any one of my team access to ChatGPT. Is it really going to improve their business? Probably not. They're probably going to turn around and go, I'm still going to Google it, or I'm still going to look on the internet, or I'm going to still do it. I'm still going to write it out, because they don't really know how to they don't have the level of literacy or the level of experience to get the most out of that technology. And where we talked about technology being a 16 member on the last podcast, that's my long preamble into it. I think data literacy doesn't do enough justice to the expanse of the challenge. Does that make sense, guys?
No, absolutely.
No, it does. I mean, I think Go, Eric, do you want to say?
No, I mean, I was just sort of what I'm grasping there is I think there's a fundamental distinction between what you're describing as data literacy per se, which is the technical ability, and some other yet undefined term which would describe the actual skill to use that technical ability, right? And so to use your Google example, I think one of the things is even Googling, there's different skill levels, right? You can
Yeah.
just type stuff without thinking about it, or you can be a bit smart about how you're using stuff, even in something as simple, straightforward, and commonplace as Googling. I've had discussions with friends who were unable to find something that they were looking for, and we went in together and with just sort of a few tricks of how you type stuff in, how you direct the search query. You end up with very relevant results, but that is a skill that has to be trained. It's not just the technical ability of typing stuff in the box, right?
Yeah, exactly. It reminds me again of the colleague that I was speaking to yesterday, was in the recruitment business, and excuse me, my cat keeps jumping onto me, is in the recruitment business. And one of the things that he learned early on was if you're able to understand advanced Google queries, he could look for, so if he was recruiting CDOs, for instance, yeah, or people in data industry, chief data officers, he would be looking for people that are only CDOs that are only been enrolled for 3 months, because he then knew that they were looking to build a team.
Yeah.
So, but with an advanced Google query, he could then find anyone within LinkedIn, for instance, that had updated their status that said, I joined in the last 3 months as a CDO.
Yeah.
Bullseye. He's then got a list of all these new CDOs that he can then write to them saying, congratulations, I've had this. Congratulations on your new role. It's fantastic. Look at your profile. You'll be needing a team now, won't you? But that's the level of literacy and skill that he knew. That gave him an advantage as a recruiter because the others around him didn't know that.
Yeah.
But my argument is that if the company worked as a team, as an organisation, you should train everyone to the same level of that. And then as a whole organisation and as a whole team working together, they'd all be up to that level. But they're not, and some people don't have the confidence to do it.
But isn't if we pull a thread from this thing on data literacy, is that the siloing of hard skills and soft skills is data literacy means those people who've got hard skills feel comfortable. But the more and more you peel back the onion of data literacy, you discover soft skills. All right? The more and more what you're actually looking at is awareness. Your awareness, your curiosity, your ability to problem solve, your creative thinking. All right, so there we've got those as individual skills, but where data literacy starts to have power is when can you do that in a team? So that's where we have this thing, data is a team sport. But people still are gravitationally pulled to this idea that it's the hard skill and not the soft skill. So one of the things that as we were cooking the subject for today's podcast was around this idea that data literacy is a static definition. And a lot of people are then saying, well, your data literacy gives you the baseline, right? And we're talking about upskilling. Right? Yeah. Data fluency says, well, am I a white belt or am I a black belt? Which is what you were just describing in there. Same thing with soft skills, which is now being rebranded power skills, is that it's still a static description. It's one of the things that I'm more and more becoming comfortable with, because then people treat it like you just said, like it's a form of knowledge acquisition. And it's not knowledge acquisition, it's a skill acquisition. And as you were talking before, what I was thinking about, well, what capacity are we looking at here that takes us from white belt to black belt, so to speak, using a Six Sigma type view of skill development? Well, we're actually talking about a growth mindset. If it's a growth mindset and it sits within the heart of data literacy, then it's about wisdom, business wisdom.
Yeah.
All right? It's about how wise are you thinking about the problem that you've got in front as a team. And what you can actually say to the executives that we get to train is you're not going to learn this in a 2-day course, right? Doesn't arrive. You ain't going to get Plato certified data literacy black belts on a 2-day course. In the same way, you're not going to get somebody in power skills and teamwork and leadership on a 2-day course. There's a revolution that has to take place in thinking of how we train people, how we actually upskill. And so I think one of the things that we've got a problem with data literacy is that, oh, we can do an LMS system. It's a 4-day course. You can be certified at the end of it. Bob's your uncle. You've done some problems that you're data literate. It's not going to happen, is it, guys?
No, I agree. It was interesting that you talked about wisdom. And I think this kind of chimes with my experience as well. There's two things like wisdom. Well, what often wisdom seems to come with age. People believe it comes with age, right? So you've been in a long time, you're quite wise, you're kind of like your Gandalf type of folk, or the Yoda, because you've got all of this kind of wisdom. That's not in itself true. Actually, within a collective group of people, then there is wisdom within those, that collective group of understanding, collective group of different ways of thinking, different ways of experiencing, harnessing all of that is where your true wisdom, which I think is what you were talking about. The other thing that I've always recruited on this is I can teach people technical skills. Yeah. And I can set them a task and say, go off and learn how to code, go off and do this technical skill and come back to me and demonstrate that you can do it. Yeah. And I can tick a box to say that. I can't do that to say, go off and learn to be curious. Do you know what I mean? It's like, but actually being curious is one of the things that I'm always looking for in the people that I've worked with and the teams. I want the people that go, what is that? What is that? You can go back to AI. What is AI? Well, I'm going to look at that up. Oh, I'm going to investigate that. I'm going to come back and tell Toby and Eric what I've learned today about that, because I'm motivated to be curious, to understand, to continue. And I think it comes back to your growth mindset, to continue to grow and to learn, to absorb. And I think that is and that all of your great innovators, that is what they had. Yeah.
So if we take that point where you're talking about there, the growth mindset, and you're talking about it, because what sits opposite the growth mindset, which is more popular, is fixed mindset. So you were just talking about, for example, the recruitment business. The recruitment business is typically born because many organizations won't upskill their people. They'll go and buy a piece of machinery called a human being that has a set of skills and put them in, right? When the people who they call machine parts are in their organization don't have their skills, they get rid of them and they go buy new ones. Well, it's just crazy, because out the door, they just got rid of people who understand their business.
Yeah.
And the other people that come in are going to take anywhere between 2 to 3 years to understand what their business is,
exactly. And I completely agree. And it's interesting the development of agile, or my interpretation, I should say, of the development of agile, coming back from, I think it was Toyota, one of the car plants in Japan, around how you need to know that you need to go and build a certain type of car, but actually that team can then decide, do you put the wheels on first, or the steering wheel on first, or do you put the chairs in before you put the engine in? All of those types of decisions. Yeah. It's interesting that people didn't actually think that was bloody obvious to sit and talk. But actually, if my job's just the tyre fitter, I just fit tyres, mate. I don't decide if I fit the tyres before the engine goes in. It's not my job to do that. Yeah. So we actually had to invent a framework for people to actually, because they're so siloed in their mentality that they just do what their task is. And in modern day and in modern delivery and in technology businesses and pretty much every other business, it's not like that. Yeah, it's about, if you want to be productive and efficient, you need to change your method and your approach all of the time, and you're adapting. And so they had to develop a framework, and then and they still don't. Sorry, Toby. But the problem with that bloody framework is they will then give you an agile training course for 2 days. and then come back and expect you all to be agile. This is skills of wisdom and curiosity that are developed over a lifetime. So suddenly in 2 days of agile training, you're suddenly going to completely change from a fixed mindset to this growth mindset overnight. It's just ludicrous.
Just what you just described as a set of skills, right? What you just said there is where Eric and now struggle is we say that's team. Because in the same way that you just described, when we start training courses, and you guys know this, when we ask the group of people to come give us a definition of a team, they can't.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like you've been designated the team.
Yep.
To not even to do something, you're just the team.
So
what you just described as sorry, go for it.
Very interestingly on that point, just the other day I was training a team using Sonic, our teamwork training game, right? And I asked them that question after their first session. I asked them, what is the definition of the team? Someone got it spot on, right? Or was in the right direction, said that a team is a group of people who get together with a shared objective, right? And the objective is what makes the team. It was a relevant take for their task. But my immediate reaction was, okay, great. So why didn't you define an objective when you first got together? Because if they had been taught that, even if intellectually they understood the concept behind it, they weren't acting as a team. They were literally not teaming, not being a team. And that cognitive dissonance of showing them, well, you weren't doing what you weren't practicing what you preach, completely shifted their way of approaching the situation and their way of thinking about how they'd been acting. And I think fundamentally it's about recognizing that it's not just going on that 2-day theory course where you're supposed to understand things. It's about actually training to do it and continuously thinking, am I actually participating in the team effort?
But doesn't that Eric, if we pull out the golden thread of what you're saying there and pull it out with Phil here, is that there's nobody gets skill.
Yeah.
Nobody gets that team is a skill, and its skill is not the same as sitting in a room with PowerPoint and a few role plays. I mean, if it was, then all the way that we watch sports, team sports, right, which have communication, they have collaboration, they have morale, they have perseverance, endurance, problem solving at speed, all right? All that I just described there is the essence of a great basketball team, as well as selflessness, which is going to come as a shock to many people out there, Kobe Bryant and the great talk about you have to be selfless, right? No ego. All of those components are the same components required by an elite business team. There's no different. And these guys spend literally years training. And we're going to reduce that to a 2-day course with lunch, PowerPoint, and role plays. You're having a laugh. You know what I mean?
Go on, Eric.
No, I was just going to say, I think, this sort of rings back to what you were saying earlier about curiosity, Phil. I think that there's an inherent flaw in the sort of technocratic approach that most companies take, where curiosity doesn't have a direct measurable return on investment. It has a massive impact. It is possibly the most important skill in lots of situations, but they can't fill in paperwork to say, oh, he's more curious now.
No, exactly. It reminded me of my experience throughout my time as being a team member and leading teams in the business world, is that and at executive level we talk a lot about teams and empowering teams, but fundamentally everything's still individualistic. So your performance marking, your bonus, your talent, your promotion is all based on your own individual success. So, and this is a fundamental flaw, I think. If you look outside of that into other, like, sports or other areas where team, it's not the same, you know. So if Brighton and Hove Albion, my favourite football team at the moment. Well, I'm a Bournemouth fan actually, but I live in Brighton, so I follow them. They do really success in the game. You don't then just go and reward the goalie, yeah, and just say, "Well done, goalie." You know, it's the team that's, there may be one of the players on the pitch would have done really well, but actually, pretty much 90% of them always know that they're only as good as the goalie's only as good as the defenders in front of them. They're only as good as the striker that scored the goals to win the game. So they know that. They intuitively know that. You come to business, you're asked, so Phil, how have you shined individually? Why are you better than Toby or Eric at what you do? The answer to that I don't have a view on that.
Yeah.
Because it's my team's a success, I'm a rewarded on team. But it's never done like that. It's never considered. It's never considered.
But doesn't that mean no, right? Because this made me think what we're talking about here is that we've got hierarchical organizations that are based on an exam system that people go through, which is knowledge based. It's based on a total fear of taking risks, so that kills being curious. It kills the cat, so to speak. All right, and it's based on not taking risk and a fear of failure. Failure is a mark of shame in every sense, no matter, right? What we're talking about is something wrong with the culture, right? What we're talking about here, what's wrong with data literacy, is because we're taking something that a key requirement and a skill and trying to lock it into the ancien regime.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
and it's like taking it's not going to work.
And
Data literacy. Yeah, go on.
So I was going to say, it's like trying to commoditize it as well. It's like this single kind of unit where I think what I'm struggling to kind of strive is data literacy is kind of organic throughout your business. Do you know what I mean? Right. It's like it's an inherent ability that you can learn to do that, but it's not the technology that's your enabler. It's all, and I hate that phrase, soft skills. We in Americans are trying to call it power skills. I don't know why, but it's those abilities that enable you to make the best out of the technology that's available to you. But fundamentally, it's those skills of working within a team that are needed. That's what's going to solve those poor souls that were at the bottom of the ocean in that went down to the Titanic in the they bless them, they wouldn't be sat there waiting for which is the one individual who's going to come up with the right idea for saving the sub. There's a team of people up there, and they'd expect that team to be working together. But the big worry is you've got 10 different individuals, and you throw them all together with but without any team skills. How long does it then take to actually act as a team? And that's the same. That's the same in the business environment, But I'd be looking for the people. Are you any good at working in a bloody team? It's like I wanted people up there trying to save me that know how to communicate, problem solve, use the variable resources that are available to them. I've got those skill sets.
And the first place you want to look for that is they play video games. Why do you look to play video games? Do they play multiplayer video games? Can they lead a team in a 40-person raid team? Because you ain't going to get that in the external world. So what we're talking about here is the real difficulty. Okay, and it's not. I'm reminded of when I was a young soldier, and I remember sitting in a training room with a captain at the time who was much more experienced than I did. And we were talking about, he was saying it takes 5 years to create a good soldier. 5 years, not 3. And he was talking about the difficulty is for many people about within that is they just do, when we talk about experienced soldiers, they do 1 year 15 times. There's never any change. The same issue that we've got here is right. There's people that it's not just the concept of curiosity. You've actually had curiosity beaten out of you.
Yeah.
By the exam system.
No, absolutely. It's not.
You're So when we talk about team, I think that you're going to go through when we know when we talk about creating high performance teams that when we get forming, you get storming. Right? It's the next stage. And that storming isn't just about egos having a fight. It's the de-skilling to adopt the new skills that they actually go through, because suddenly you're giving them permission to ask really dumb questions. And those dumb questions are the questions that move you forward, which they can't do back in, back at the ranch, so to speak, because they're not allowed to ask dumb questions. So when we talk about culture.
No, I was just going to, a little side note, I'd argue that's even more a problem when we're talking about data and technology, because that's widely considered the domain of experts. If you're not in it, you're not supposed to ask questions. You're not allowed to ask questions.
That's a really good point. Yeah. And people will stand with confidence and explain and show you a spreadsheet or a graph and tell you X is Y and Y equals, problem or success or whatever it may be. Yeah. Actually, having the confidence to go in there and say, explain that to me, demonstrate that to me, what are the variables that you use, what statistics did you use. It's like I was talking, someone yesterday was looking at doing some analysis on people that had left an organization and why they'd left an organization. Yep. And he was reporting it back. The point that he couldn't get over to, they're a large employer, so they employ, I don't know, say 10,000 people, but only 400 people have replied to the questionnaire. Mm. So the point that he wanted to say was, you need to make a decision whether you think this is statistically relevant valid to you as an organization. Because the HR wanted to make decisions on their recruitment strategy based on the output of the analysis that this chap had undertaken. Yeah, and it's a classic issue around that kind of data literacy point, around not really understanding. So it wasn't the analysis that he'd done; it was spending the time trying to explain what statistically valid looks like, and why there is a risk associated with whether you got less than 20% of respondents. So but you don't want to make a decision for the 100% of your organisation based on that. Are you comfortable with taking that level of risk? And actually, I'm not comfortable with giving you this product without a massive great caveat at the bottom of it says, my advice to you would be don't make a rash decision for your business based on the output from this finding. Go away, and get more people to respond, or do it as a longevity, because you've got a benchmark now, but next year could be different. Or the year or the previous year could be different. You don't know what those factors are. But again, this is all about basic data literacy and understanding. And it really does kind of frighten me sometimes within organizations. There's a lack of that. But it's not. This chap was employed to be the data analyst, and he was providing that product to a customer, but that customer wasn't an informed customer of that product. And that's a real problem. Do you know what I mean? It's like the basic level of literacy really needs to be everywhere within an organization.
But there's what you're saying there is that, so if we take that as a key component, all right, that there's a level of knowledge. You made me think that when I did my degree in psychology, back in the day, we had to spend the first year doing a whole year on statistics.
Was that before Freud was born, or was that after that?
Thank you, guys. I love you very much. It feels like that now, But now I look back and think that the understanding the statistics and the misuse of statistics, all right, because there's a whole series of areas that we can examine where people have used data, all right, in particular within health. All right, health research is a nightmare. Health and medicine, the type of data that you actually get to be able to make decisions, make recommendations, populate the front page of so many newspapers with such rubbish, all right, that everybody should, stop eating this or start eating this because it will do this and the other. But if you actually look at the component, just 1 second. So there's a level of knowledge, all right? But then how do you communicate that is what you're saying, because you don't necessarily need everybody in the team to have that knowledge. What you need is that person to be able to say, here's the check and balances, because what you need is a multidisciplinary team that comes from different angles to look at the problem. All right.
Yeah.
And that you have permission in that process of collaboration to ask questions. You are encouraged to ask dumb questions, to test hypotheses, to iterate, to play. Does that make sense, Phil?
No, exactly. And it also reminds me about those two things. One was when you talk about statistics and that ability to understand, interpret, and visualize in the UK came apparent when it was COVID. And we had one guy who was very, very good at articulating quite complex statistical analysis, but make into a way. And there was a good colleague of mine whose job it was to provide the analysis for COVID for the UK. And all of their effort was placed upon how do we visualize this? And where I'm reminded of is I do a lot of sort of hill and mountain walking and climbing and stuff. And when you're doing that, you always walk at the pace of your slowest team member, right? Because not everyone's going to be at the same fitness level or maybe carrying an injury. There's no point in racing ahead when you've left someone behind, yeah? So that is the same as any skill within a team.
Yeah.
And within data literacy. So within that team, there's no point of sitting there going, I don't really understand this. Because if you don't understand this, then lots of other people aren't going to understand this. So you need to be able to say, this isn't good enough. This needs to be raised to a level where I do understand this.
So we call that my nom de plume, right, that I use is Columbo. And part of teaching
you might
the
have
team,
to explain to who Columbo is.
Yeah, I'm working on it. It's about what you got to do. It's an ancient American detective that wore a scruffy white coat. Peter Falk played it. Yeah, I mean, what was the characteristic of this detective was he looked like a bumbling fool, right? Because he would ask really stupid questions. But and this, this very successful detective series was based on the fact that all of the expert criminals or people doing con jobs, etc., just thought this guy was an idiot. But he was asking really stupid questions, and the signature of the series was, at the end of it, the guy's in handcuffs, and he turns around and he has respect for the detective because he asked dumb questions. So I use that to say, we used to use that in sales school as well, right? In the Columbo method of selling. The person in a boardroom, the person in a meeting room who asks the really dumb questions actually owns that room.
Yeah.
You'll see somebody who's got high level of soft skills, who's in a senior role, ask really stupid questions, be aware they're not stupid. First mistake real experts make is think that person's stupid. It's not. They are honing down on something that's not necessarily apparent and is about to pull the carpet from underneath your feet as they drill down into whatever that's taking place. But what we need is, we talk about training teams to have that Columbo methodology. So when we talk about a culture, one of the key components of a culture is norms and values, right? And the norms and values tell us, in particular, what is right and wrong, what is good and bad. And when we talk about Hofstadter is the Dutch sociologist in understanding, is the leading light in this, and there's lots of people have built off what are the dimensions of culture, how do we treat emotion, how do we treat authority, how do we treat time. Most people and senior executives do not understand that culture, right, because we've talked about this, where Peter Drucker talks about culture will eat strategy for breakfast. Actually, culture is strategy. In this key component, your soft skills culture, all right, is the driving force of your performance. All right. And so when we talk about those rules of what you can and can't do that you've inherently follow, all right, what you think's good and bad in a meeting. Do you remember last week when we were doing the training on Sunk with Jez and the team from Eden Smith, and Jez drew a square like this and said, most people won't operate out of that square.
Yeah.
That's your rules of culture. And what
Yeah.
we're talking about is collapsing that square and rebuilding it with curiosity,
Yeah.
with collaboration. That's a full-on training module.
It reminds me of when I used to work for central government, and I used to work for financial regulator here in the UK, and one of the things that we did a lot of emphasis and time on was training around a lot long enough, which is interesting, comes back to your understanding and why I really love the way Strategic Teams Academy and Song take training, is that we talked a lot around cultural bias, because we talk a lot about strategy, but actually cultural bias is a real problem. And often where organizations have had these big black swan moments where something's given them is because they've got cultural bias. Yeah. So, for instance, if you go back to Nokia and no one's ever going to buy a large phone, it's a apocryphal tale these days. It's because you had confirmation bias within that room.
Yeah.
So all the same demographic of people, all white, male and pale, all sat in the room, all like the little phone that they were using. None of them did any of the video, probably didn't play any game that was online that was available at those times, weren't curious about what else was going on in the world around them, was dismissive of anybody else because they thought they were the best and they were great. Yeah. So they then just do that. Meanwhile, you've got Steve Jobs over there going, actually, what do people really want? Could we really change this up? Let's make something new. Let's do something different. Yeah, that can't last forever. I want a phone that can do different. Why have I got a device that I could, one to play music and one to make a phone? Can I just carry one device around, please? Yeah, and and the cultural bias pieces, because you often, when you're thinking about teams, you tend to pick your image of yourself, and leadership's a real problem around this. You end up gravitating to the people, they're like me, I like them, I'll employ them. And then you get a team full of people with exactly the same views and opinions as yourself. Yeah.
I think that there's one bit to add to that, is that you can train yourself to fight against your natural tendency for cultural bias, right? Toby, you were talking about the Colombo methodology. I think one of the points behind that is to say, I don't know, I am not right. Where can I find someone who might have another point of view, another way of thinking, another approach to this, who could, take me out of my standard thought process or my intuition, right? And so that's those dumb questions. They can be used to look for ideas that you're not going to have yourself, because you're in a situation where you're not going to have those ideas. And that you can train that. You can train that mentality of saying, you know what? Let's try something else. Let's go look for something. Let's go look for someone who will see it differently.
Yeah.
I think, can I build on? Sorry, go on, Phil.
And I was just going to say, to keep this relevant to the title that we've got, people, why? And this is all about data literacy, though, because this is about data turns into information. Yeah. And it's information that informs the decisions that you make. So, and often people, don't worry about the medium in which your data comes in. Yeah. Actually, it's the totality. It could be visual, for instance. It could be all sorts of experiential, all of that information that comes into you. But knowing that you can use all of that input to inform decisions is what's really, really important. And in video gaming, this is where this comes to its own, because it's a blend of inputs of the visual, sound. Yeah, it's also directional. You'll get prompts, text. You get all of this input into one to inform your kind of decision making. That's why I really like it as an environment for kind of understanding in that sense, because it's not linear in its approach, but much. Pretty much, I can guarantee most people listen to this podcast when they come across data literacy, it'll be a PowerPoint presentation. Yeah, that's just one. There's like, exactly. It's like, and how many people does that switch off? I've got a 60-slide PowerPoint presentation for you, and I'll be asking questions at the end of it. You're like,
the first thing you look for, isn't it? Somebody's coming in, and you're looking at the bottom where it is on the screen that they've got the number of slides. If they've made the mistake in numbering it, and you're going, oh my God, how long is this going to be?
Yeah.
And, or you sit yourself at the back of the room, just behind somebody, so you can just, you got your glasses on, maybe they got a little bit of thing, and they can just
or in the virtual world that we are now, you're sensible when you run two screens, and you set up that clever bit of AI, clever bit of AI that Eric's got that makes your eyes look like you're looking at a screen when all you're doing is over here.
You're on your bloody.
Yeah.
I think there's a thing though. There's a number of things that kicked off for different ideas for podcasts here. Right? Was the first thing which says, so what are you going to do? It's a bloody nightmare that you're facing. Are you going to get data literate? Well, if you're a football team, all right, you don't think that it's just the team of people on the pitch that need to be a culture of performance. What they talk about now in elite sport is everybody that's in the whole of the business is part of the culture of performance. From the person that sweeps the changing room, right, to the boardroom, to on there. Everybody's focused on what is it that we're doing to think about winning.
Yeah.
And if you suddenly take winning as a key component here, and you then think, okay, what's the lever that I need to turn to make this whole thing move? Mm-hmm. Well, you start to use, all right, I mean, I'm going to say use us, right? Because I'm biased like that. That's my bias. All right. Okay. Because we've developed a team training program that can make your teams move on that. But actually, the real leverage is going to be you as a group of senior executives need to make the decision that the organization needs to change its cultural rules. And you guys start training. And you guys start training now. And you start leading that change throughout your organization. And you have to live it because you can't talk it. You have to live it. You have to be walking examples of what it is. Because the minute you do that, you become a magnet. And young people will absolutely jump at that opportunity to not be employed as a robot. You'll be amazed at the incredible enthusiasm and motivation that you unleash because you give these people permission to be creative, to rethink.
I'd add something else to that as well. I think if you want to recruit, employ the best of the best, then you're going to have to embrace that way of working, because those people coming through are going to want to work for those companies. There is nothing worse than spending your entire life being trained, developing skills, technology, approaches that you want to do. You come into an organization and then you're told you can't make decisions for yourself. You can't be curious. You can't influence. You can't change. They will just leave. That's not what they're about. That's not what they want. They don't want to work like that. The best and the brightest do not want to be put in that box as we described. They want to break the box down.
But then let's come back to what you guys were talking about once before when we were cooking ideas around some of our marketing strategy. And what do we hear from senior executives right now? We won't name the company, but one amazing French company's come up with the idea. What was it, Eric? That there are going to be no offices anymore.
Oh,
everybody's gonna. What was it?
They're going to work in open space environments.
Open office.
That was 2022 or 2023.
right, the whole new strategy post-COVID is to go open office, right? That's going to drive collaboration. In the US, you've got the dinosaur leaders, and they're in the UK, and particularly they're in the finance industry. Is you can hear the whip. You will be in the office. You
Yeah.
will be working 80 hours a week. And why? Because that's how we learned. It's like, dude,
Their cultural bias. Their cultural bias. I'm desperate to say this because I always want to link everything back to data literacy and data because I love it so much. But you talked about football teams, I think, Toby,
yeah,
before, didn't you?
yeah,
Football teams, data led.
yeah,
Modern football teams, absolutely data led. A good football player, data literate. They're looking at their statistics, their analysis. How far did I run? How
yeah,
effective was I? How many first passes did I make? Yeah, how many second passes did I make? How
yeah,
many tackles did I make
yeah.
throughout that? Yeah, they're looking at that and they're analysing that. They're looking at their positional play.
Weekly,
How
weekly though. It
yeah,
isn't
yeah,
like
yeah.
once a
And
year.
everyone
Yeah,
within that team,
the whole
including
thing.
the kit man, the physio, they know all
Yeah,
of this. Yeah,
yeah,
it's within their DNA. I mean, Alex Ferguson, the great manager in the UK,
yeah,
introduced this.
yeah,
The British cycling team with Dave Beresford, he went for the 10% marginal gain using data analysis, and that was absolutely every single person in their business had the right, was given permission to change anything that they thought would be more productive. If it was down to having a different lick of paint on the bike frame, or a different spoke, or a different bit of kit, or a nutritional drink, or someone said, why don't you listen to a podcast that's really exciting, like Empowered Teens, before you sleep to get you really
yeah.
energized. You know what I mean? But anyone can have and that's what when culture eats strategy. Yeah, the strategy, win the Tour de France.
Yeah,
How? The culture of my
yeah,
business is going to do that for me.
yeah. And it's
Yeah,
not going to be right that leaders know it, right, and they get it right, and that managers do it and they don't question.
yeah.
I mean, I've seen that being used in Grand Prix, for example, by one of the senior executives there, and then this is dinosaur stuff, man. All right. And that DNA change that we're talking about is the very it's the heart of what we're bringing to. It's the reason why we're bringing a multiplayer video game to the marketplace, because it's to unleash your people in this way of being, not this way of thinking, this way of
That's a good way
being.
to describe this way of
Do you
being.
know what
Yeah,
I
I like
mean?
that. Yeah, yeah.
For the love of God, aren't we just fed up with the mechanical model hierarchy that just I've been writing about it again, like because maybe I'm getting old and sanguine or whatever, but it's no different between modern business and feudalism. It's just there isn't. It's
Well, I
like
mean,
we think we left feudalism behind, but we didn't. You
yeah,
know,
no, exactly, yeah,
it's like
yeah.
and the robber barons that I remember in corporate world. So we've broken our game up into the story of Black Swan versus the Circle, and Black Swan we've taken from this idea that it actually comes from Karl Popper, but it's being used as an unexpected event that brings in
Mhm.
incredible change or changes stuff. But we are the Black Swan team, because our job is to upset the cultural rules that you guys are on that are definitely taking you nowhere.
Yep.
Right,
Yeah,
well, they are going to take you somewhere and it ain't going to be nice. Do you know
yeah,
what I mean?
Yep.
yeah. I mean, it's that if you want to make change, you've got to be change, and that is the biggest, and it takes a lot of discipline, and it is hard work, and you've got to train yourself to be able to do that, because that old phrase, talk the talk and walk the walk. It's really hard to walk the walk, and it is going to be painful, and it is difficult, and you will face obstacles, and people
Yeah.
will certainly oppose what you want to do or what you want to change. But if you're about liberating, and this is why I'll come back to data literacy, if you want to liberate data literacy, you need to liberate your culture within an organization. You need to free it from silos, from shackles, from fear. You need to do all of that. And that, it's not, that's why I, it, because data literacy seems like a thing we talked about for a theme for this podcast, is something that you can just learn and tick off. It's not. It's within your DNA of your organization. You have to change everything if you're really going to be what people talk about being data driven. It's a fundamental mindset reshift completely.
So well, that growth mindset where we're coming full back,
Yeah.
but I think it's also incumbent upon you two guys as well, right? Is that says, okay, so we're taking information, all right, about our experience and about our work with clients, and we're mapping out what the problem is. We're analyzing it, we're analyzing what the problem is, and we're looking at the implications of do something, don't do something, or remain blind. All right, because cultural bias actually means that you blank out important information. And we talk about that as groupthink, skilled unawareness. Right?
Yeah.
But what you've brought to the table and what you guys are working on is that in the sunk video game simulation and the workshops that we produced is that we've added and enhanced the video game with data literacy problems. Do you two want to talk about that just for 2 minutes? I think it's worthy of a podcast itself. But as we're coming into the ending of this podcast, I think it's important to give a solution to people as well.
Maybe do you want to talk about a little bit about the adaptations we made, because we're going to do a demo, a small part of this, and we're going to launch this in Big Data London, which is in September. And Eric and the team have been working on some adaptations to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the core of what we're doing here is that we're taking challenges, right, puzzles and obstacles that are already built into the Sonic experience that are there to challenge how a team interacts, be it focused on communication or collaborative skills. And what we're doing is we're saying, well, if we include data challenges in that same situation, we shift it a bit, we change it a bit, right? We maybe take some of it and some of the information that needs to be shared, and we put it in actual databases that you have to go and explore and find relevant information in. What we're doing is we're creating a situation where you are forced to interact with data using teamwork skills as a team. And the only way to get past that challenge is to actually bring those two worlds together, right? So that technical data literacy skill and the power skills that enable it. And we're basically creating situations within Sonic that force those two together to create, this more complex, richer, more advanced version of data literacy as an actual training ground, right? And so, we're going to get that out very soon, and you'll be able to experience it at the Big Data London 2023 event, if you come.
And just to add to that, Eric, as well, what we're also working with Eden Smith on this as well, is alongside that, we'll provide coaching, which will kind of expand upon some of those themes that you'd expect to see within a traditional data literacy, but framed around your experience from within the game. So it kind of contextualizes it and allows you, and I think that as you described, Eric, it puts those team skills and how's that relevant to the world of data literacy and how you can take that back to the workplace. So things like visualization, context, analysis, interpretation of data, which are things that you'd expect to see in traditional data literacy, we will explore those themes through coaching. The gaming experience will give you kind of what I'm describing as a kind of a foundational level in there. And there's opportunities to go even deeper with that, either working with ourselves and coaching with some of our partners. So within it, we'll also develop a bit of a scorecard, so you can see both your team skills and your data literacy skills, where you think as a team, yeah, we're pretty good at that, we kind of got that. We're really behind the curve on this. And then you can start to tailor, well, if I wanted to really introduce data-driven data literacy through in the organization, what are the things and what are the approaches that I need to think about? And then we can provide the ongoing coaching and support and development that goes along that. So I think the key to the key thing for me is the data isn't a one and done, because as Toby said, we're about cultural change.
Yep.
And the route into understanding how you start to change that, and importantly, why, visualizing it and understanding that, is through the gaming experience, which really brings it to life, which for me is completely unique in the industry in terms of training that I've seen, and it works.
Another great way to start your journey into exploring this different mindset and sort of start this journey to change is to subscribe to the podcast and like this video. So on that note, we'll see y'all.
You took the thunder away from me. I think one of the things that you just mentioned there at the last piece is that on Monday we're doing a recording with Eden Smith. I think we'll put Eden Smith in the information that comes with all of the stuff. Because
for those that aren't familiar, Eden Smith's a data and technology recruitment and consultancy agency, but also one of the big sponsors of the Big Data London, and they're a great bunch of people. They live and breathe this. They work along the same ethos that we do. So
we're partnering with them,
and we're really pleased to partner with them.
Yeah. So we'll have more of that announcement next week. You'll expect more of this. Our podcasts will be more regular now that we've got more organized in terms of doing it. And so I'm going to hand back to Eric.
It was great having this chat with you, and we'll get back to this on the next episode. So we'll see all of you then. Ciao.
Cheers. Thank you very much.
Bye.